In a borrowed room in Jerusalem, a rabbi lifts a cup of wine and says a phrase that will be repeated across the globe for the next 20 centuries. The English word is covenant, and it is the skeleton of the entire Bible, but we have a translation problem. And God does not just want to rescue them, He wants to employ them. In Exodus 19, God sets the baseline. He says, "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Hold on to that phrase, a kingdom of priests. What does a priest do? A priest stands in the middle. A priest represents God to the people, and the people to God. Israel is not being chosen merely to be a protected class. They are being chosen for a cosmic vocation. They are meant to be the mechanism that delivers the blessing of Abraham to the universal scope of Noah. They are supposed to show the rest of the world what it looks like when humanity actually lives under the rule of its Creator. But to take on that vocation, they have to formalize the kinship. When we hear the word covenant today, we almost always equate it with a contract, a mortgage, a business agreement, a legal document you sign to protect yourself. In Exodus 24, Moses orchestrates one of the most physically shocking rituals in the Old Testament. He builds an altar at the foot of the mountain. He sets up 12 stone pillars. Young men slaughter oxen in the sand. Moses takes the blood, gallons of it, warm and heavy, and divides it into basins. He throws half the blood against the stone altar. Then he reads the terms of the covenant out loud, the rules of the household. The crowd responds in unison, "All the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And then Moses does something that would make a modern reader recoil. He takes the remaining blood from the basins and throws it directly onto the people. And that modern assumption completely distorts how we read the biblical text. Blood on skin, blood on clothes, blood in the air. Moses declares, "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you." Do not look at this as primitive magic. Look at the legal mechanism. The altar represents Yahweh. The crowd represents the nation. They are now covered by the exact same blood. It is the physical, visceral realization of berit. Two parties who share no biological connection have just become blood relatives. God has bound himself to a nation. But notice the terrifying difference between this mountain and Abraham's fire pot. Abraham's covenant was a unilateral promise. Sinai is a conditional treaty. God said, "If you obey my voice." A contract is an exchange of property. It is an exchange of goods or services. You sign a paper, you pay money, you receive a house. The preservation of the earth is guaranteed. The ultimate victory of Abraham's seed is guaranteed. But this specific generation's right to live in the land, enjoy God's protection, and serve as his priests, that depends entirely on their obedience. The blood dries on their clothes. The kinship is sealed. Now comes the obligation. The terms of Sinai take up massive sections of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. We call it the law. We tend to read it as a cold, exhaustive moral checklist. But in the ancient Near East, law was not abstract. It was the detailed mechanics of the relationship. It governed farming, property disputes, sexual ethics, and temple architecture because Yahweh was not a distant deity. He was the head of the household, and his household had rules. And like every covenant before it, Sinai receives a sign. If you break the terms, you lose the house. But you do not become blood relatives with the bank. Noah had the bow. Abraham had the mark in the flesh. Sinai gets a marker written into time itself. The Sabbath. Every seventh day, the entire nation was ordered to stop. No harvesting, no commerce, no fire building, no travel. To a modern ear, it sounds like a forced day off. To an ancient empire, it looked like economic suicide. But that was the point. By stopping their own labor, Israel was physically acting out their allegiance. They were declaring that their survival depended on Yahweh, not their own hands. The Sabbath was the weekly pulse of the covenant. But there is a fatal problem. Before Moses even makes it back down the mountain with the stone tablets, the architecture fractures. The Hebrew word is berit. In the ancient Near East, a berit was not an exchange of goods. Down in the valley, the people panic. They do not know what happened to their leader. So they pool their gold, melt it down, and cast a calf. They throw a festival to a metal idol. This is not just a moral failure, this is treason. It is covenant adultery on the honeymoon. When Moses walks down the mountain and sees it, he does not just drop the stone tablets out of shock. He shatters them violently against the rocks. It is a precise legal mechanism. He is physically enacting what the nation has just done legally. The treaty is broken. The kinship is shattered. God spares the nation from total destruction, largely because Moses invokes the earlier, unconditional promise made to Abraham. But the golden calf exposes the terrifying vulnerability of the Sinai covenant. It establishes the tragic rhythm for the rest of the Old Testament, a cycle of rebellion, judgment, exile, and partial restoration. It was an exchange of persons. It was the solemn, binding legal mechanism used to forge kinship between two parties who shared no biological connection. It made family out of strangers. Sinai delivered the perfect rules for human flourishing. It mapped out exactly what a holy nation should look like. But a stone tablet cannot change the human heart. A law can tell you what is right. It cannot give you the capacity to do it. The covenant was built on an if, and the human heart, unchanged since the flood, could not sustain the if. If the architecture stops here, the story ends in failure. Israel will inevitably forfeit the land, and the blessing will never reach the nations. The structure needs a new guarantee. It needs a representative who can hold the covenant together when the people cannot. It needs a king. 4 centuries of brutal, cyclical failure pass. The nation spirals through the era of the judges, bleeding out its mandate. They demand a king, hoping a monarch will fix what the stone tablets could not. And eventually a shepherd from Bethlehem takes the throne. When 2 tribes or 2 kings cut a berit, they were declaring publicly and permanently, "I am yours, and you are mine." David unites the tribes. He secures the borders. He builds a palace of cedar in Jerusalem. And in 2 Samuel 7, he looks out his window at the weather-beaten tent holding the Ark of the Covenant. And he decides it is time to build God a permanent temple. God's response fundamentally alters the biblical architecture. God sends the prophet Nathan to stop him. He essentially tells David, "You are not going to build me a house. I am going to build you a house." The Hebrew word is berit. It can mean a physical building, like a temple, or it can mean a dynasty, a royal bloodline. God is playing on the word. He is refusing a building of stone and instead promising a lineage of flesh. The terms of an ancient covenant were not a list of arbitrary rules. They were the conditions of the relationship. They outlined what loyalty actually looked like. Listen to the exact terms. God says, "When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." The scope of the covenant shifts again, from a universal world to a single family to a sovereign nation, and now down to one kingly representative. In the ancient world, the monarch embodies the people. He is their proxy. If the king is faithful, the nation receives the blessing. If the king rebels, the nation absorbs the curse. But this creates a terrifying tension. God promises that David's throne will last forever. It is an unconditional guarantee to the bloodline, and they were almost always sealed with an oath, a physical sign, and blood, because you were binding your life to another. But look at what God says about the individual sons who will actually sit on that throne. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, but my steadfast love will not depart from him. The dynasty is unconditional. The peace of any specific generation is fiercely conditional. And this is where the entire covenant structure is headed for a massive, catastrophic collision. Think about the architecture built so far. You have the promise to Abraham, an unconditional guarantee of land and global blessing. You have the Treaty of Sinai, a strict conditional law demanding perfect allegiance, carrying the explicit threat of exile and death. And now you have the promise to David, an eternal throne, but occupied by flawed human kings. What happens when the proxy fails? This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. If you miss this mechanism, the Bible looks like a disjointed history of God trying one legal framework, watching it fail, and trying another. What happens when the kings of David's line become just as idolatrous, violent, and corrupt as the pagan empires around them? The terms of Sinai demand that the nation be cursed, stripped of the land, and driven into exile. But the promises to Abraham and David demand that the nation survive in the land with a king on the throne forever. The covenants are about to tear each other apart. The structure cannot hold, and within a few generations it collapses completely. The collision arrives in 586 BC, and it is absolute. The Babylonian war machine breaches the walls of Jerusalem. The city is gutted. The cedar palace of the kings is leveled. The temple, the very center of the Sinai covenant and the resting place of the ark, is burned to the foundation. But the biblical covenants are not a series of failed experiments. They are a single expanding architecture of divine kinship, God binding himself to humanity layer by layer. And the reigning king of David's line, a man named Zedekiah, is forced to watch his sons executed before his own eyes are gouged out. He is bound in bronze fetters and dragged east into the desert. Israel is pulled out of the land by the roots. This is not just a military defeat, it is a total structural theological collapse. Look at the architecture. Look at what is lost. God promised Abraham this specific geography, but now the people are marching in chains toward Babylon. God promised Moses he would dwell among them, but the temple is rubble. God promised David an eternal throne, but the throne is empty. The covenants appear to be dead. It looks like a failed experiment. The conditional terms of Sinai have finally triggered the ultimate curse: exile and death. Each major covenant adds a new promise. Each requires a new obligation. Each institutes a new sign. And each expands the scope of who is included in the family. But if the nation is destroyed, how can the unconditional promises to Abraham and David survive? God is seemingly trapped by his own legal framework. If he ignores Israel's rebellion, he violates the justice of Sinai. If he abandons Israel completely, he breaks his oath to Abraham and David, and the universal rescue operation of Noah fails. How do you solve a legal impossibility? You need a new mechanism. While the Babylonian siege ramps are literally being built outside the walls, a prophet named Jeremiah sits in a prison courtyard in Jerusalem. He is watching his nation die, and right in the middle of the collapse, in Jeremiah 31, he receives a transmission that changes the entire trajectory of the Bible. God says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah." And the architecture starts long before the 10 Commandments. There it is, the first time the phrase appears in Scripture, New Covenant. But listen closely to how God defines it. He does not say he is inventing a new religion. He does not say he is scrapping the moral terms of the universe. He says it will be not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke. The problem with Sinai was never the law. The law was holy, just, and good. The problem was the material it was written on, stone tablets, external rules handed to an internally fractured people. It demanded perfect allegiance from a heart that was fundamentally incapable of giving it. So, what is the new mechanism? God says, "But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." Do not miss this detail. The terms do not change. The location of the terms changes. God is promising a surgical intervention, a fundamental alteration of human nature. It starts in the aftermath of total global destruction. He is going to take the exact same law of kinship, the exact same demand for allegiance, and embed it into the human will. He is going to give humanity the capacity to actually keep the conditions of the relationship. But Jeremiah's prophecy leaves a massive unanswered question hanging in the smoke of Jerusalem. How? How does a holy God legally forgive the centuries of broken covenants, absorb the curses of Sinai, fulfill the oath to Abraham, restore the throne of David, and change the human heart? The prophecy gives the promise. It does not provide the representative. For that, the architecture waits 600 years of silence, until a rabbi borrows a room in Jerusalem, sits down with 12 men, and picks up a cup of wine. Return to the borrowed room the night before the execution. Jesus sits at a table during Passover. It is the meal designed specifically to commemorate the blood on the doorposts in Egypt, the meal that defined national identity. And right in the middle of it, he reroutes the entire meaning of the ritual to himself. The heavy wooden doors of the ark open. He picks up the cup. He says, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." For a modern reader, it sounds like a spiritual metaphor, but to the men sitting at that table, it sounded like a legal earthquake. Jesus is not inventing a phrase. He is intentionally colliding two massive ancient texts. First, the new covenant. He is invoking Jeremiah 31. He is claiming that the 600-year wait is over. The long-promised structural intervention, the changing of the human heart, is about to begin. Second, in my blood. Or as Matthew and Mark record the exact Greek phrasing, "This is my blood of the covenant." Where did that exact legal formula come from? Exodus 24. It is the precise phrasing Moses shouted when he threw the basin of warm oxen blood over the crowd at the base of the smoking mountain. It is the binding mechanism that forged the conditional kinship. Jesus is taking the blood of Sinai and the promise of Jeremiah, and he is holding them in a single cup. After more than a year of water, confinement, and death, a family steps out into the mud of a ruined planet. But look at the structural mechanics of how he is doing it. Jesus is not acting as a private religious teacher. He is acting as the proxy. Remember the architecture. He is the physical descendant of Abraham. He is the legal heir to the empty throne of David. And he is the only faithful citizen of the Sinai covenant. He represents the entire structure. And a few hours after this dinner, he walks out to a garden, is arrested, and is nailed to a piece of Roman timber. We are used to looking at the cross purely through the lens of personal salvation, but look at it through the lens of ancient covenant law. Remember the legal impasse that destroyed Jerusalem? Sinai demanded that the rebellion of the nation be punished with the ultimate curse. exile, and death. But Abraham and David held unconditional promises that the nation would survive and the throne would endure. God could not ignore the law, and he could not break his oath. How do you resolve it? The proxy absorbs the curse. When absolute darkness falls over the execution site at Golgotha in the middle of the afternoon, it is not just a meteorological anomaly. The first thing Noah does is build an altar. It is a terrifying recall. It is the same thick darkness that fell on Abraham in Genesis 15. Thousands of years earlier, God walked between the split animals and swore a self-maledictory oath. He said, visually and legally, if this kinship is broken, the lethal consequence will fall on me. May I be torn apart. The cross is the ancient oath being executed. God, in the human flesh of the Davidic king, is taking the liability of the broken Sinai treaty onto himself. He is the arrow of the rainbow striking the warrior's own chest. He is the severed animal in the dirt. He is the blood of the covenant, poured out to pay the exact legal debt humanity incurred when they shattered the stone tablets. Jesus is not starting a disconnected religion. He is fulfilling the impossibly strict terms of the old one. He renders the perfect obedience Sinai demanded, and he absorbs the lethal curse Sinai threatened. The collision is resolved. The obligations of the past are paid. But a dead proxy cannot rule an eternal kingdom, and a severed sacrifice cannot bless the nations of the earth. The smoke of an offering rises into the open air. The curse has been absorbed, but the architecture is not yet complete. To finish the blueprint, the story requires one final impossible movement. 3 days later, the stone is rolled away. The resurrection is not just a theological miracle, it is a legal verdict. It is the Father's public declaration that the debt is fully cleared, the curse is exhausted, and the proxy is vindicated. The promise made to David is finally and permanently secured. The throne of Israel is now occupied by an immortal king who can never fail, which means the kingdom can never fall. But a king needs a people, and a new covenant needs a sign. Weeks later, in the rushing wind of Pentecost, the sign arrives. It is not a weapon hung in the clouds. It is not a surgical cut in the flesh. It is not a weekly day of rest written on a calendar. And in Genesis chapter 9, God speaks. He establishes the first explicit covenant in Scripture. It is the Spirit of God Himself taking up residence inside the human chest. This is the mechanism Jeremiah promised. The law written on the heart, the internal capacity to actually love the God who saved you. And look at what happens to the scope. The borders blow wide open. The gospel breaks out of Jerusalem, crosses the Mediterranean, and floods into the pagan empires. The family of Abraham is suddenly expanding to include Romans, Greeks, Africans, and Asians. The original promise that all the families of the earth would be blessed through one seed is finally connecting back to the universal scope of Noah. A rescue operation for the whole world, built on the blood of one man. This is what the Bible actually is. It is not a disjointed scrapbook of ancient religious experiments. It is not a history of a frustrated God trying one contract, watching it fail, and desperately writing a new one. It is a single, unbroken, brilliant architecture of divine kinship. God binding himself to humanity, layer by layer, holding the tension of our rebellion for thousands of years until the structure was ready to hold the weight of his own Son. You have heard it. You recognize it. It is the bedrock of the Christian communion table. Technically, there was an implicit kinship bond in Eden, God and humanity sharing space, functioning together. And that changes exactly how you stand before Him right now, because if you belong to Christ, your relationship with God is not a modern contract. It is not an exchange of goods where your standing depends on your flawless performance, and one major failure means you are evicted. You are in a covenant. You are blood kin. The liabilities of your failure were absorbed in the darkness of Golgotha, and the perfect obedience required of you was supplied by your king. You do not have to earn the family name. You only have to trust the proxy. The next time you sit in a church and someone lifts a small cup of wine, do not just see a quiet religious tradition. Look through the glass and see the architecture. See the flaming torch passing between the severed animals in the dirt. See the heavy blood splashed against the stone altar at Sinai. But humanity shattered that bond. They chose autonomy. See the empty throne of David finally filled. This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. He did not start a disconnected religion. He finished the work. If this structural view of the Bible opens something up for you, the biggest thing you can do is subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. That is genuinely how people find this content, and we depend on you to spread the word. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you. The result was a violence so pervasive that it triggered a global uncreation. The flood was not just a severe storm, it was the collapse of the cosmic order. So now, standing in the silt of a new world, God lays the foundation for everything that will follow. Notice the scope of this first covenant. It is massive. God says, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth. This is not a private tribal arrangement. The scope is universal. It covers every breathing thing on the planet. The soil itself is included. But when a modern reader hears the phrase new covenant, we instinctively project our own assumptions onto it. We assume it means a clean slate. But the most important part of the Noahic covenant is what is missing. Look at the conditions. Look at what humanity is required to do to keep this relationship intact. Nothing. There is no if. God does not say, I will not destroy the earth again if you behave. In fact, just a few verses earlier, God acknowledges the exact opposite. He says, the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Humanity has not been cured of its rebellion. The flood washed the earth, but it did not wash the human heart. So God makes a unilateral promise, total, unconditional preservation. He binds himself to the earth, guaranteeing the changing of the seasons, the cycle of day and night, seed time and harvest. He creates a stable platform. Without this baseline, no future history, no future family, and no future redemption is possible. And then comes the sign. Every covenant has a physical marker. God says, I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. A brand new religion, a permanent break from the heavy, ancient, rule-bound history of the Old Testament. We call it a rainbow. We paint it on nursery walls. We think of it as a trick of the light through water droplets. But the Hebrew text does not say rainbow. The word is keshet. Keshet is a weapon. It is the exact word used for a warrior's hunting bow or a battle bow. Ancient readers understood exactly what this imagery meant. A warrior hanging his bow on the wall means the battle is over. Hostilities have ceased. But look closer at the shape of the weapon in the sky. The string is facing the earth. The arc is pointing up. God has taken his weapon of divine justice and pointed it at his own heart. He is declaring that if this covenant is broken, the lethal consequence will not fall on creation. The arrow will strike him. It is a staggering image. God is absorbing the liability of human failure. This is the first layer of the architecture. The scope is universal. The obligation on humanity is zero. The sign is a retired weapon. But a stable platform is not the same thing as a restored family. God has promised not to destroy the world, but he still intends to rescue it. And to do that, the scope of the next covenant is going to aggressively narrow. But to a first-century Jewish ear, that phrase was not a metaphor for starting over. From every creature on earth, down to a single aging man in the desert, centuries pass, the population rebounds, empires rise in Mesopotamia and Egypt, and God does something entirely unexpected. He ignores the centers of power and focuses on a single childless nomad living in a tent. Abram is nearing a century old. He is a man whose biological legacy is effectively dead. Yet God calls him out of his homeland and makes a promise that redefines the rest of biblical history. The scope of the covenant shifts radically. We move from the universal preservation of Noah to the specific lineage of one family. God promises Abram three things: a geographic land, an uncountable seed, and a global consequence. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Do not miss that last phrase. The narrowing is not an exclusion. The narrowing is the strategy. God is selecting one family to act as the rescue operation for the universal scope he preserved with Noah. It was a highly specific, legally binding claim that carried millennia of structural weight. But a promise is not a covenant. In the ancient Near East, words were cheap. Kinship required blood. In Genesis 15, we get one of the most visceral, unsettling scenes in Scripture. Abram asks God for proof that the promises will hold. God tells him to bring a heifer, a female goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. Abram slaughters the animals, cuts the large ones precisely in half, and lays the bloody carcasses opposite each other in the dirt. This was not a bizarre sacrifice. This was ancient legal binding. When ancient kings forged a treaty, they would split animals, and the lesser king, the vassal, would walk barefoot through the corridor of blood and severed flesh. It was a self-maledictory oath, a visual curse. The vassal was acting out a physical consequence, saying, "If I fail to keep my end of this allegiance, may I be torn apart like these animals." Abram prepares the pieces. He waits. The sun goes down. A terrifying darkness falls. And then Abram does not walk between the pieces. He is paralyzed in a deep sleep. Jesus was not scrapping the Old Testament system. He was stepping into a massive, unfinished architecture and tying together ancient, distinct threads that had been left hanging in tension for centuries. Instead, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch, the physical burning presence of God himself, moves through the blood. Think about what that mechanism means. God is taking the position of the lesser king. He is walking the path of the curse. He is declaring, on penalty of his own destruction, that the promise of land, seed, and blessing will not fail. Even if Abram's family fails, God will pay the price of the breach. Just like the bow pointing upward in the clouds, God is once again absorbing the ultimate liability of the covenant. But unlike Noah, this new layer of the architecture requires an obligation from humanity. God tells Abraham, "Walk before me and be blameless." It is a demand for absolute allegiance, a life lived entirely under God's authority. And it comes with a new physical sign, circumcision. It is intimate. It is permanent. It is a shedding of blood in the very organ of generation, passing the covenant marker to the next generation before a child can even choose it. It stated, physically and undeniably, this family does not belong to the nations. This family belongs to Yahweh. The architecture is growing. First, unconditional preservation. Now, a chosen family carrying a global blessing, bound by a divine oath and marked in their own flesh. To understand what Jesus was actually doing in that room, we have to trace those threads from the beginning. We have to watch what each one adds, what each one demands, and how they build the exact blueprint he came to finish. But a family is not a nation. And an unconditional promise of future blessing does not explain how this family is supposed to interact with a holy God on a Tuesday. For that, the scope must expand again, and the terms of the relationship are about to become terrifyingly exact. 4 centuries pass. The single nomadic family multiplies into a massive slave labor force inside the Egyptian empire. They are pulled out by a series of plagues, led through a parted sea, and marched into a wasteland. And at the base of a jagged, smoking mountain called Sinai, the architecture of the covenant expands again. The scope shifts from a patriarchal family to a sovereign, independent nation. There are hundreds of thousands of people standing in the dust,